Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spin Rack, and we also have,
Calvin Ellis ready to rock.
well, we're both surprised and contacted each other this morning to talk about the CGC scandal. And CGC has made a statement. Here's their statement right here. That the Certified Collectibles Group, which includes Certified Guarantee Company, is aware of the incident involving an individual tampering with CGC comic holders. And it's a very long statement, but it's on IG, so it had to be a bunch of pages. So they have recognized it. They have said it's one person, but where there's one, like you find one mouse in your house, there might be mice in there. So I think, but this it sounds like it is one person. Let's go with what they're saying, but hopefully it's not more. And what is your knowledge on this? Because I'm still having a hard time understanding it. Can you help me out on this one?
Trying very hard myself to piece this together based on what they're saying. It's been tough for me to. I'm trying to. I'm trying to say this as articulately as I can. It's been tough for me to piece this through because I've had to go to several different places to get the information, and a lot of it is just guys saying everything but exactly what happened. But to the best of what I could put together, guys were manipulating a flaw in the CGC system where they were able to take books that, well, say you had a copy of Incredible Hulk 181, but it had a green label, and they were able to manipulate that by sending something back in and getting a different label for it instead of the green label, and or passing it off as a book that didn't, as a book that wasn't originally given a green label or a purple label or something to that nature. That's the best I was able to get from it because, to be quite honest, I was trying to just get some reading on it, which was really, really difficult. And then when I'm listening, I got guys who are talking for 5, 10, 15 minutes about, everything except the situation, what was going on. But that, I believe, is the crux of it. That, hey, uh, you know, and I mean, we discussed this off camera, where, because there's such a volume of certain books like Amazing Spider-Man 300, New Mutants 98, Incredible Hulk 181, that you can manipulate that particular thing of, hey, let me resubmit this, but I'll submit it with this label instead, and they'll reholster it, and because they're, and then the reholstering, I'll be able to pass this off as a 9.6, even though this is a restored book, or this is a book that is has the coupon clipping cut out, that type of stuff. I'm also not sure. I also wasn't able to find what books in particular were the ones that were being targeted, because I'm sure it wasn't something like, New 52 Batman #1. It would have to be one of the higher volume, more expensive keys. But this is on the comic guys too, because a lot of it was just a whole bunch of, I don't want to say whinging and moaning, but when I'm listening, it was just a bunch of whinging and moaning and nothing that really detailed specifically the things that I was looking for.
I think when we were talking about it, you had mentioned like an idea of having a book that was kind of restored
Mhm.
and then like ripping open. Well, I wanted to add in the rip open the plastic, container, and then the sleeve rather, and then send it to CGC, and they're like, oh, look at this 9.8 book type,
Mhm.
and sell it again. Oh, get a better rating, and then be able to sell it for X amount of dollars. So it's a. I mean, the hard part is, I know. Well, because I was joking with you about it earlier, because I've been on lines with you when you were doing the CGC stuff, and it was a
Yeah,
big,
terrible.
but it was a big surprise when you had totally not say that you cashed out on it, but I think as a practice, you just felt like you cashed out on doing those type of deals with the CGC and the signings, and not stop from signing, but not worrying about signing from CGC and that sort of thing. So it was interesting to see that you had made that decision, and we talked about it later, but then to see this, whereas I think this is I mean, people were really upset with them when they saw them grading Superman #1 and they just lost it. And I'm not sure if the stuff happened before that, but then that was
Well,
a scandal.
that was just ignorance
Mhm.
because they were looking at the way the guy handled the book, and they were like, "Oh, how dare you handle it that way?" And like, what did he do that was wrong? And then most of the guys who are saying this stuff, they probably never handled a Golden Age book, let alone Superman #1. He has to go through the book. You got to flip through it. Check the paper suppleness, that sort of thing. They're like, oh, look how he was handling it. So there's like, no, this is not like. I guess they wanted him to handle it like a newborn baby, like barely touching it,
Okay.
cradling it ever so
Some with the
gently. It's like, no,
gloves, sterile.
yeah, yeah. It's like, no, you don't have to. And I know that because I've handled not Superman 1, but enough books and books that were in a fragile nature to understand. Okay, yeah, there's still a bunch of stuff that you can do. But that I was looking at that book and I said that book looks great. The fact that he could do that, with it
Yeah.
looks good. But the see, and the thing is, I don't want to speak out of turn because I don't want to say, hey, this is what I think they were doing, and somebody says, oh no, that's not what we're doing, but that's the way I could game the system, and then let it go that way. When I was when I used to do CGC witness, when I was getting books signed, and that was such an arduous process because you had to wait on the line for the signature and then wait on the line for the submission, and it turned the conventions into a drag. It really did. You do that once or twice, that's okay. But after you did that like 4, 5, 6 conventions, especially something like NYCC, it's just a drag. So I was able to get out because my selling practices improved to the point that I was getting comparable numbers. So the time, I mean, of course, if you have like a 9.8 Incredible Hulk 181, you're definitely going to get a lot more money than if you have the book, ungraded. But for the other stuff, I was just like, look, I'm getting comparable numbers, so I don't really need to do this grading anymore. And I didn't want to be bothered. I just didn't want to be bothered with it anymore. So I got out a while ago before this happened. But even at that time, I saw that there was a flaw in the system, and when it came to the CGC witnessing, but they found that out on their own, and they corrected that. So there's always going to be something towards somebody taking liberties, and or somebody sees a flaw and they're going to manipulate it. They'll manipulate it to their benefit. It's just out being outright deceitful and duplicitous. No system is going to be foolproof, but you're already dealing with comics where you have a high level of paranoia as it is. So guys, now you got something that guys can talk about for I don't know how long, and oh no, I don't know if my book is legit, and what about this book, and everybody wants to send, we should all send our books back en masse, which won't happen because the majority of those books are just not affected by it. But I think, and right before this, there was something with, did you hear what happened with Epic Nation?
No, tell me about it. Well, what
Well,
is that? What is Epic Nation? What is Epic Nation?
Epic Nation is like a third party handler, and they would have people would send their books in to get the book signed. So you couldn't make it to the con, but you could send your book into Epic Nation, and they would then go to the con, take your book, get it signed, submit it to CGC, that type of stuff. So a third party handler, if you will. And I think somebody who was working for them, to be honest, the funny thing is that the guy who got flagged for it, I know the guy. I mean, I don't know him, like not like we're cool
Oh,
or anything, but I would see the guy, I would see him coming by
Perp
and see him
Walk,
work behind. Hmm?
Perp Walk.
Yeah, 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 that dude. Yeah, I was like, oh, I was like, it's him. I was like, I know this dude. This dude would come and he would buy from this other guy next to me. I was just like, okay, all right. I was like, it was him. It was like, all right, so close, so close. But I never dealt with him because he only came to buy graded books. He never came to buy books that weren't graded. I don't deal in graded books at conventions, and I don't do a lot of grading now. I will buy a book that's graded faster than I'll send a book in to be graded. So that's where that was at. But you have the situation with Epic Nation, and then of course you have the situation with CGC, and you get a lot of grumbling, but most of the guys are going to still keep grading because that's how you'll get more money. You know, it puts the book it puts the book in question in a very fixed position because if it's not graded and it looks nice, okay, some guy could hem and haw about it. But once it's graded, even if it's like as low as a 4.0, the price is locked in. There's very little to argue about at the end of the day. This is what this book goes for, and they usually like. And most guys are very reflexive when it comes to grading. You get a book, you're not sure if the price is good, you're not sure what the book is, just grade it. Grade it. Once it's graded, it's got a price on it. Now you can ask for some money. And I've always been like, no, I can, I can get good money for this without grading it. But for those people who are still in that lane of, get a book and grade it, yeah, what's going on with CGC was probably that was, definitely something that perked up a lot of ears, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I just in turn from the what's the name Instagram to see what you're saying, the grumblings, and I think when I watched some videos, they kept going of different scams. It was like they found three or four different scam books. So that's the first set. You can see one of the things that's hard with comic books because it's happened before. I guess it's our time, but we were like small, like in the 70s. Like I guess it had to happen in the 40s and 50s where they were like, the comic book industry is dead, right? So we're kind of always predicting some negative things, and not to say that the book, actual regular publishing schedule might not be gone. Might not leave or be different from the way we know it now, but everyone is quick to say, see what happens. You see this guy here, not no disrespect, he has a great title, Swaggle House. That's a great name for his thing, but it's a smile will almost be like, hey, they had to respond. It just feels kind of weird that you would go in and be like, but this is how we do. I think when I go back to, this is not CGC, but it's just comic related. Like when Devil's Due was doing books and they were connected to Image and they brought G.I. Joe and they were doing movie stuff and this, that, and there's all this buzz. And then, of course, their overhead and their money can't have an issue. And people were like, Devil's Due is down. Like, what? And then when IDW is in their struggles and saying they're losing money, and people like IDW, and it's just like, well, now wait a second. It's like I got like a ton of IDW books that at one point when I didn't know about them, and then now on my shelves I have a ton of those books, and it's just like they brought so many great books. How do we just applaud? It's like we applaud something, the failure.
Because they're haters. Come on. I
Yeah.
mean, that is something I've seen throughout comics. Sorry, I've seen that throughout comics. Hey, I mean, look, I'm a comic collector for a very long time. So are you. Love comics, but there is a fair amount of haterade, if you will, going through that goes through comics because a lot of the guys are very envious that they can't get the books that they want. Okay, they can't get the books that they want, or they feel the comics. And I've never understood this. There's this underlying feeling that comics should be a certain price and no higher. Like, all these things should be for $1. And, the only books that are really going to be worth money are Action Comics #1, Amazing Fantasy 15, and then the other stuff we'll decide how much we want to pay for it at any given time. And I said that's utterly ridiculous because then you have a collectibles market that's totally valueless if you go by that. But these, they'll look and they're like, oh, Devil's Due is down. Good. Now there's just a fair amount of haterade. And IDW is very good for their trade, their hardcovers, and their subscription variants. Those are always good things to have because they're always overlooked. Even in the fact that people know that they make money, people still overlook them at the end of the day. So I always like enjoy that when it comes to IDW. But yeah, if IDW would go belly up, you would literally have guys out there with the Schadenfreude and tap dancing on their grave, and you're like, why? These guys are producing books. They were producing books for lineups that if they hadn't done it, you wouldn't be getting any comics. That was Transformers,
Yes.
GI Joe,
Yeah.
a whole, all that like the Hasbro properties. They were trying to do something with ROM. Didn't really take off. Sonic the Hedgehog, I believe, is still with them. Godzilla. So these properties here, where they're not at anybody else, they're at IDW. That was the same thing with Dark Horse, where Dark Horse picked up. I mean, that was Star Wars for over a decade. It's
Yeah.
You like Star Wars? That was the only place for Star Wars. That was the only place for Star Wars for a very long time. Okay, it was either you were reading a book or you were reading a Dark Horse comic. And but I know if Dark Horse would have said, "Look, we're closing up shop," these guys would be like, "Ah," and why? Why? It's simply because they hold some grudge against Dark Horse because the price was too high on a regular book, or they couldn't get this, or they didn't like these particular practices. Not realizing, no, these guys are all part of the market. It's the same thing when they go with, "Hey, DC Comics is going to go out of business." I was like, do you think that would be good for the comic book market if DC Comics went out of business? Do you honestly think that Marvel could fill that void or these other guys? Like, no. If DC went out of business, pretty much Marvel's going to not take too long to follow after. These guys need each other, and they need those other providers to be successful in what they're doing. So you have a thriving readership, so that it makes sense to produce these things. But if DC were to go under, or IDW for that matter, it's not good for comic books.
Yeah, it's
So
sorry.
I'm sorry, that was a long-winded thing to say. The same thing with CGC. You don't want CGC to go in there like, look, serves you guys right. Now you know how it feels. No, no, we don't want CGC to go under. Okay, we don't want CGC to go under. You want CGC to close that loophole, be a bit more forward thinking as to where people might be able to penetrate in the future, and stay the gold standard of grading, which they are, because nobody's going to make a rush to CBCS, hell no, to PGX or any of the other guys. And people still want that third party system of evaluation as opposed to it just being, you bring the book to me, I say the book is near mid, you say the book is very fine, we're going to go back and no, give it to CGC and whatever they have, like it or love it, that's the grade of the book.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, they did fill a gap for something that was necessary, needed. Now, as a layperson, you look at any person that, you get your McDonald's or whatever, and you say, "Hey, why does this have to cost more to do something that used to cost this?" And it's just like, now wait a second. Now, you understand that it didn't cost you anything to bring your comic book to the seller and say, "Hey, you want to buy?" To the buyer and say, "Hey, you want to buy this book? It's whatever. This is Hulk 181." And it's like, I see some issues with it, this, that, and the other. I'll give you $50 for it. And it's like, what? No, but if you have your, if people have bought into the system saying, "Hey, here's this 9.8 of Hulk 181. If it's not going through this whole scam, you have something that's like that." So, I mean, the scam thing is brilliant because you don't reopen the book. So I think someone was saying they had a lot of things. They're saying, "Hey, you could they could have a rip page out of that. You redo it and they don't check it still has that rip page, even though it says it doesn't." And it was like a lot of, it might have been hypothetical because it's kind of hard to say because they would like, it was very, very expansive in the talks of it. But then if you had all these doubts, then how did you get into business with these people? So I think ultimately we got to go with what they say as far as being one person, maybe one person within a system, but then at the same time, as you said, fix it and then work well with it, because then, the whole thing is that I put the other thing is, and it's not a scam. It's like, hey, I put up my Hope 181 on eBay. I send it to you, and either I'm lying about my grade and you buy it on my pictures, or the other person can say, "Hell no, this is not it. This is and you lied to me," and the next not send the book back, and you're like, "No, you need to send that book back." It's like, "No, this guy is this guy is trying to sell bad books and this, that, and the other." When it finally eBay comes into it, person decides, "I'm going to crumple it up and send it back." And I'm like, "See how bad it is?" It's like, "What?" And it's like that sort of thing where a scammer is going to scam, but work on trying to make the system better. So, any other thoughts?
Mm, you touched on something there. I don't know. I don't want to extend this longer than it would be going organically. But for those people out there who are worried about grading your books, you just, if you want to get your book graded, not an issue. You still get the book graded. The, the sad part of it is when you do this type of thing, it undermines credibility in a collectibles market that's already rife with paranoia and people who don't really think comic books have value. And that has been the hardest thing with for me as a comic seller, where I tell you, I do the shows and I got people come out to the shows and they're on a budget, and it's like I jump up and down inside like, why did you come here like you're grocery shopping? I used to do the toy shows, and the guys would come out with rolls of money like they were dealing drugs because they knew that they were going to have like $400 or $500 to get the stuff that they wanted, but they also wanted to make certain they had enough money to go and get what they wanted because there's no, I said it before, there's no dollar bin of toys. You can't go to the toy show and say, oh, I'm going to hopefully get that Generation 1 Optimus Prime and I'm going to find it in some bin and some guy's going to have it underpriced for $10. Like, no, you came there with money. With comics, I have seen such a thing of where, you know, so much lowballing and so much undermining the value of a comic that the person still wants at the end of the day. They still want it, but want it at a price to the point where it doesn't make any sense to even bring it to a show and sell it. It doesn't. Where a $50 book, these guys think $10 book, these guys got to wonder and they want to look at the condition and make certain, that sort of stuff. And they're like, oh, you know what? Nah. And then I'm not going to buy it. And then they walk out of there and they pat themselves on the back because they saved $10. But you came to the show. You paid $5 to come into the show. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But then when you have stuff of this nature, it reinforces that negative aspect, that negative mentality of comics where, see, told you, it's not worth it. Don't spend any money on the whole thing. Get everything on the cheap, lowball this. And, I just don't, I've never understood that at the end of the day. There are a lot of books that when I first started collecting have greatly appreciated in value. That's just the nature of comics. With time, a lot of the books get more valuable. And but again, there's this competing thing here where it's like I'm gonna outweight the price, knowing that the trajectory of the price is to go up. So you're hoping that somebody makes a mistake, or you go to some, you go to some yard sale and there's somebody got a stack there, and you get it over this. And I understand you wanting them to be cheap, but then I always worry about narratives like this or when things like this happen where people don't have faith in this particular system or they don't have faith that they can submit their books. And then all it makes is just that, okay, then it's the self fulfilling narrative for those guys who are like, see, don't do any of this. Just live out of the quarter bins and this stuff shouldn't be worth, you shouldn't be spending all this money on this stuff anyway. It's just comic books. Comic books shouldn't be expensive. Comic books, you're going to spend that much money on a comic book. So that's the larger thing when I look at it, not just from a seller's standpoint, but from a collecting standpoint. Because to be quite honest, if there's no monetary value in collecting comics, then I might as well be collecting dandelions, based on what shade of yellow that they have. Comic books need, they need to be worth something at the end of the day, or they're not collectible. They just aren't. Not because these are things that are being made to make money. They're being produced. It costs money to make them, and a lot of times, if you play your cards right, you could actually make a little bit of money based on your collect. I mean, I know people are shocked when I go to buy their collection and they see the money that I'm willing to offer them. They're shocked. They're like, oh, I didn't think it was that valuable. The only people who are more shocked are the ones when I offer them even less than what they think. Because I say, hey, look, the whole Chromium Man stuff, nobody really liked the Chromium Man. I'm sorry to say. That book never really took off. But I think that's fair within it. But anytime that somebody does something like this, when they commit this type of fraud or they game the system or they manipulate the system, I don't know if they realize it, but they are tapping into that substrate, a substrate of comics where, a lot of guys just don't feel that they are valuable. They just don't feel that they're valuable. It's not worth spending $10 on a variant cover. Why would you waste your money? And then this just helps to feed that narrative. That is probably the worst thing for me that comes out of this. But I hope it's rectified and rectified tightly, and then everybody can just get back to business.
Okay, so we've run into the CGC folk. We have a video about their process. They've been pretty cool to me when I've been around there, even though I haven't done anything, but I've only been there with you. So ultimately, I don't know who wants anyone to go.
Those are the good old days. Those are the golden. That was the golden age. It was great.
Yeah.
But then they got so big. Everything got so automated, at least for me. And it was a couple of, it was between, I said, I don't need to grade to make the money I'm looking for. I'm actually doing better. In some cases, I'm doing better. I'm doing better than the guys with the graded books. That's one. And it really was nice to stop by and talk to somebody and recognize them, ask them how business was doing. I actually like that aspect of it. But once it just became, hey, almost like a drop off thing, I was like, there's no reason for me to do. I could just send it through the mail for all of that. So the impetus for me to do it was even less. So, but it was not. Hey, those are the high days, the golden age.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd say that say no one wishes anyone to have to deal with scammers and someone find a system thing through the system. I think I've watched a couple of things about scammers,
Oh, those
and
guys are the worst. I've been. I mean, I don't think anybody's dealt with comics for any long period of time and hasn't been scammed. But because I know I've been scammed. So
mhm.
I mean, I've had books stolen. One guy was like, "Oh, nobody cares about Superman books." I said, "Somebody cared about mine because they stole
So yeah, nobody, as a business, I think they immediately went to that CGC was finding ways to do it, or they weren't doing their job correctly, and any
them."
business can kind of be. Hmm?
You can't put that on. I can't. You can't put that on them because, like, I mean, you were the one who pointed it out to me. If you're dealing with, and these guys are dealing, because at one point their backlog was to the point if you submitted a book, you may not have seen that book for a year because that's how much influx they were getting, and they had to hire more people, they had to expand all that type of stuff. So it's a lot of stuff, and it's not a process that you can go through. It's not mechanized, it's not
Yeah,
automated. There's no conveyor belt where you can just submit it to a machine and the machine gets the value, gets the grade value, and can just do this like one book a minute or something. It's still a people process thing. So yeah, once you're dealing with people, sorry to say, but when you deal with people, nothing's going to be 100% foolproof. And there are always guys out there looking for ways that they can game it. They're always looking for ways that they can game it. So I won't fault them for that unless it was something that they had been warned about or were told, were aware of, and they didn't do it, or they said it was good, but it's still no good, at the end of the day. But they're the gold standard for a reason. I'm pretty sure they'll be able I'm pretty certain they'll resolve it.
yeah. So let's hope we get past this. There's a lot of books that are already in there that people are selling. So if you tear that whole system down, you have something that's still a collectible in the collectible package that someone's going to say, well, that's not a 9 point. No, it might still be. You just want to get the price down. So ultimately, the process for the people who haven't been scamming and been following the rules and doing all that stuff have been doing it. So good luck to them, and let's move past to get more books. And maybe whoever is doing this, maybe they should have found a different book than Hulk 181. Like it seemed like they went right for the prize, the top prize. So um Spinner Rack is
Out.